Good afternoon. I'm Andy McNeill, and I'm here with Aaron Pilkington and my host, Matt Duffield. Matt, how you doing today?
Good, but it's co-host, Andy.
This co-host,
is 50,
sorry.
Don't sell yourself short.
And so, Matt, so how's it? The session just ended. Did you get a good night's sleep?
I slept pretty well. I'm so glad you came on, Aaron. And always good to see you. And your head full of hair, man. Andy, I mean, look at this hair, dude. Yeah. I mean, it's just.
If I had hair like that, Aaron, I'd grow it long. If you happen to be watching this live, I've got a hat, but I mainly do it because I got a bald head that's just reflecting.
Well, hey, Andy, let me say this about our friend Aaron here. So it wasn't the last day of session, I guess, which would have been yesterday, but the day before. We're in the chamber, and I see Aaron, and we can get into this later. I don't know how many bills you ran, but I commended you in person. I'll commend you again on how hard you worked, and it was ridiculous. I mean, if there was a hardest worker award in the House, I'm serious. I think Representative Pilkington, he would be my nominee for this. But we were in there, and I look over. We had been in the chamber for an hour and a half, and I look at Aaron, and he looks like he hasn't slept for about a month. And he's usually, I try to keep my beard fairly whatever. And at that time he had a beard, and I noticed I looked over and it looked like he hadn't shaved in a week. And he was just laying back like that during this session. And I said, man, I'm glad this thing is wrapping up, because I think, Pilkington's about spent. I actually sent him a picture in there, messing with him. But I'm so glad you're on here, Aaron.
Matt, so that picture you took of me, anytime someone would ask me, hey, how's session going? I would just send them that picture. So they were like,
just
okay,
like this.
Message received.
Well, let me just quickly introduce it. We're Free Arkansas podcast, and it's the flowing thought of ideas. And really the central themes here are, we want to make Arkansas a better place. And so what we want to look at is where do we rank on different things around the state, good and bad, and how are the things what can we do over a period of time to make it better for a place that we all love? And that's really the heart of it. You can go look at all of the rankings that we talk about on freearkansas.com, and then please post anything that you want to post about us. We take all the criticism you can dish out. And so anything good or bad we'll accept. And we're super happy today to have Representative Aaron Pilkington, who represents Clarksville and maybe more. I'm not actually sure. Aaron, why don't you give us a quick introduction? I know a little bit about you, but just
Sure.
Fill us in.
Yeah. So I'm a State Representative Aaron Pilkington. I represent District 45. So that's all of Johnson County, Lamar, Clarksville, Knoxville, where I live, Coal Hill, Hartman, Huntstown, Harmony, Oark, you name it. So that's Johnson County. And then I got a little bit of Polk County too. So I've got London and Augsburg. And then I've got a little bit, very little small bit of Russellville. So I don't even think it's technically city limits, but I've got a couple of Russellville addresses. So I kind of creep over there into Duffield's neck of the woods.
I did not know that. So you guys are your representative neighbors.
Yes, very much so.
And Aaron, correct me if I'm wrong, but the nuclear plant is in your district, correct?
Yes, yeah. So actually, a lot of people who actually probably live in Duffield's district but work in my district at A&O. So, so I've got nuclear one. So I do like to brag I'm the only rep with a nuclear plant in their district. So
that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Well, and we're coming to you from, God's country, aka Russellville, Arkansas. Yeah. But I would actually sort of include Clarksville in that, because it feels like it's just next door. I feel like, Augsburg is right around the corner from here. So, okay, it's over. I'm curious from both of you, highs and lows it could be anything on the highs and lows, but I'm just particularly interested as well in bills that you thought, I'm super happy that passed, or I'm super either disappointed that didn't pass, or maybe I'm really happy it didn't pass. I don't know. Can you give us a quick synopsis?
Sure.
Matt, or Aaron, you go first.
Well, yeah, I'll go first. I mean, obviously, healthy moms, healthy babies. That was a big piece of legislation that I was able to get through. It even was part of the governor's agenda. She talks about it at her kind of like press conference wrapping up, and then even I saw she put out a graphic of her like 10 big achievements this session, and that was one of them. So, really happy to see that. I'm sure we kind of get into more of that later. So that was a big high getting that done and kind of bringing everyone along with us on that, because that's just something, whether you're Democrat or Republican, everyone could kind of agree on that bill. And so I was really excited to kind of get that bipartisan support. And even actually, I mean, John Brummett was on Roby Brock the other day and was praising it. And I think that's the first time I've probably ever gotten a compliment from John Brummett. So
that's awesome. And what exactly does that do?
Yeah, so it is a kind of an omnibus piece of legislation. So it does a couple things. So we're raising our Medicaid reimbursement rates for maternal health. It's about $45 million in total that's going towards that. So that's going to help our labor and delivery units, which you've seen a few shut down around the state. We did Medicaid coverage for gestational diabetes with CGMs, which were one of the first states in the nation to do that. So that's really big. I mean, obviously, a lot of weight issues are around the maternal health outcomes that we have. So remote patient monitoring when it comes to blood pressure cuffs for new mothers and postpartum moms. We created community health workers. We've kind of established their licensure as well as doulas. So those are two kind of new categories in Arkansas that we're now allowing Medicaid coverage for, getting them kind of in the fold to not only help women transition their coverage after that 60 days, but even beforehand. And then, of course, presumptive eligibility, which is huge. So, when you think you qualify for Medicaid, but you're not sure, and it's a long paperwork process, still being able to go to the doctor and use presumptive eligibility to be seen that's big. And that was one of those things, honestly, I never thought I'd see us do in Arkansas, but we did. So that's great. There's a little bit of tort protection in there too for tailing insurance, and that was really just there to help some of these providers who've retired. You still have hospitals covering the costs of retired physicians, and so we scaled that back a little bit, didn't get away from it, just kind of took an average around other states. So that kind of also helped reduce the burden for hospitals on keeping these labor and delivery units open. So that's kind of the high 35,000 foot. There's probably some other stuff in there I'm missing because I've slept and run a lot of bills since then. But it's it's a good piece of legislation, and it's kind of delving into some big issues and in a lot of ways too, just getting us really hyper focused on this area that we need to fix.
So what was the low?
I mean, obviously, I wanted to get 12-month expansion passed for that 138. I mean, not getting that passed was a mix of a high and a low. I mean, we got it out of the House. I was like, yeah, we got some momentum and we're going. And then we hit a stone wall in the Senate. So that was a low. But, one of the things I tell a lot of people, because, a lot of people came to me like, hey, man, how you feeling? I know you cared a lot about that issue. And I do. But it's one of those deals I left everything on the table when it came to that. I mean, I took the concerns I heard from members, from the governor's office, from everyone, and tried to fix that bill and make it as palatable as possible. You ran it as hard as you could. There's nothing that I look back and say, man, I wish I would have done that differently because I could have got it done. And we could have got it passed had I not done X, Y, Z. I don't see that at all. And so when you just kind of leave it out on the field, for a lack of a better word, at least you're sad, but at least you did everything you could. So that, I mean, obviously that was a low for me, but there's. I'm trying to think.
I want to come back to that particular bill. Matt, tell me your highs and lows.
Let me just interject here, Aaron. I wasn't sure. I looked at my seniority sheet. So was this your fifth term?
I should have asked you that. I was thinking that a little earlier.
So
yeah, this is my fifth term.
I guess the question I would have for you, because this was just my second term, now that the dust has settled, how did your fifth term compare with the other terms? I mean, just as an overall, maybe general, however you want to answer that.
Yeah, it's hard to tell. I tell everyone I think your second term is your worst term because it's like you now know enough to know to be disappointed, whereas your first term, you're just kind of happy to be there. And like your second term, you're really trying to push and move the needle and get things done, and then you just hit brick wall to brick wall. And so actually a lot of sophomore members this time around, I was go, hey, guess what? This is probably going to be your worst term. And so if you felt like that way, it's okay, because guess what? Your third and fourth are going to be awesome. My fifth, I mean, yeah, I feel really good about it. I mean, there's a lot of things I think, I'll put it this way. I did everything I wanted to accomplish. There were some things that I was helping with that didn't get accomplished that I wish I would have done better at. But all in all, I mean, no, I think it was a good session, and I'm pretty happy with it. And I think too, you kind of learn something every session, even being a fifth termer. And, some of the things too I've thought about is I need to do a little better job of kind of, I get off on these weird paths with things, and and people are, and then I'll run a piece of legislation. People are like, "Where did that come from?" And so I think I need to do a better job of talking to my members in the interim and be like, "Hey, I know this sounds kind of weird right now, and so don't wait till I've got the bill. Let's talk about it now," because that's always been something I always try to do, is find kind of things that people aren't really talking about that need to be fixed. I mean, obviously the data centers, I think we'll talk about that later, but that was one like 2 years ago. I brought up, and people are like, "What is this?" And now we were talking about it nonstop all session. And so it's like, I wish I would have brought members along earlier so we could be more proactive. And that's kind of a lesson I think I learned this session.
So Matt, what's your highs, high and low?
I think, well, it's getting a lot of press today, but we passed a bill that created the death penalty for those who rape a child under the age of 13. And that was some legislation that I originally, was very interested in trying to take the lead on. And Representative Jeremiah Moore took the lead on that. And I was a co-sponsor on that. And, he really worked hard to cross all of his T's and dot all of his I's to make sure that the Attorney General's office, reviewed it and made sure that it was good to go. And the reviews that I've seen from the taxpayers across the state, they were highly, highly supportive of that. So as far as one bill that I saw, I wasn't the lead sponsor on it, but, worked with Representative Moore on that. I think that was the high as far as that. As far as bills, I took the lead on. Here locally, it was a smaller bill. I think all policy has its own importance in its own ways, but we upped the sale of fireworks by a week, and so that was something that the Russellville City Council wanted, so they could get those, and I think that's good. That's going to help local fireworks salespeople across the state and help put more money in their pockets and help put more money in the communities as a result of that. And then I also had a bill that prohibited registered level 3 and 4 sex offenders from coming within 100 feet of a public splash pad, pool, and that received a lot of support. I've got that through early on in the session. The Hot Springs Village law enforcement, they came up in support of that. They'd had a real issue with a creep down there, and so I think that solved a problem. And that was the county sheriff's office brought that to me a year or two ago, brought that to my attention. So I think that was a good one. And it's like I said, Andy, and I think Representative Pilkington's the same way, is our goal is to create policy that solves problems and not create more. And that's, the goal at the end of the day for myself.
Aaron, I'm curious if this is a difference, and I could be wrong on this. I don't actually have this sitting in front of me, but isn't there new leadership in the House who runs the House this session versus the sessions before? And I'm curious how to compare and contrast that. Is that something that like you down there can feel the difference, or is it like, no, it doesn't really matter who's in charge? It sort of feels the same.
No, it's massively different.
Okay.
And so this is my third speaker. I started out with Jeremy Gillum. We had Matt Shepard for 3 terms, and then we had Brian Evans, who's the new one now. And it was less contentious. And so that was kind of really, I think, a really good part. And it's actually funny too, because I joked with Shepard. I was like, man, we're getting along the best we've ever gotten along with, man. He's like, now that you're not in leadership, we can, we're buds. It was funny. We had
Is he still there, or did he term out?
No, he's still there. So he's, which I was kind of shocked when he said he wasn't going to run for speaker again. And then he's like, no, but I'm still going to run for state rep. I'm like, wow, you went from being the most powerful guy in the room to just chilling out in the back. So,
because if you're the speaker, you get to decide what hits the floor. Is that right?
Well, kinda, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of of power in that position. And then, of course, a lot of deference I think members give the speaker. You get to be in the room. I mean, there's negotiations that go between the House and the Senate and the governor's office. And, you get to be that one guy in that room with 3 people. So that's great. But no, I mean, it was great. I mean, it wasn't a contentious speakers race either, the way it had been in the past. And I think because of that, it wasn't like it wasn't as factional. So like the first time I came in, I said Jeremy Gillen was speaker. Then it was a big race between Andy Davis and Matt Shepard, and it was very contentious and very tight. And even that, there were ripple effects that had kind of occurred. And so luckily it felt very healed. And that was a conversation I had a lot with Speaker Evans and stuff. I was like, hey, you're going to basically walk into this. And I think a lot of people are kind of looking for a reset, and so let's try to do that the best we can. And I think he did a really good job of accomplishing that and helping out. And it felt way less, it was way less contentious than it did in the past, which is good. I mean, that's something you want to see, and you want to see people getting along, and for the most part. So there's still. I mean, trust me, there's a lot of choice words people I'm sure have.
Oh,
about
I'm
me,
sure.
so.
I'm sure. I don't know, Matt. Like, what do you think? Even I don't know if it's like, I know you don't have the same five terms, but like
Andy, one thing you'll find interesting, and we've had these discussions, and I'd like to get Rep. Pilkington's opinion on this. There's not, in my view, a right or wrong answer. So, Andy, when we elect a speaker in the House, it's a private ballot vote. And every session there's a discussion, well, should it be a public vote on the board, how you vote for speaker? And there's pros and cons to that, but I've found that interesting since I've been down there. But, Rep. Pilkington, what's your view on that? Do you think in the future when we elect a speaker, should it be the private ballot like it's been, or should it be a public vote on the board, or what's your view?
I always think it should be public. There's a joke. Everyone walks in with 60 votes for speaker. And so, there's a lot of people who will say, oh, yeah, I'm with you, and then tell the other guy they're with you. And then, so it's funny, you'll talk to each candidate, and they're like, oh, yeah, so-and-so's with me. And it's like, I don't think they are.
I don't know. They really are. And, maybe.
Yeah. And so, to me, I just think, it just keeps people honest and, about who they're supporting and who they're not. And so, some people say, well, I don't want to do it for, I'm fear I might get retribution from the speaker. And then they'll say, oh, well, it should be private because, that doesn't happen anyway. It's like, well, if it doesn't happen anyways, then why do you care? So, I to me, I've never been one to really, I think it's great to know. And, I think, there was a really contentious speakers race back when the Republicans first took majority. And so that has always had ripple effects, and that's always been kind of part of the conversation. But, like I said, to me, it's never been one I've been like, people can come up and ask me on the street who I voted for speaker every speaker election, and I'll tell you, like, it's not, to me, I don't need to keep it a secret because I'm always pretty vocal about where I stand on issues. So same with on things like this. So, but some people, they it's an awkward position because you've got 2 people you like and you're friends with, and you're having to pick one or the other. I mean, but to me, at the end of the day, I mean, it's better to be honest with people, and I'm pretty upfront, and they may want to put you in a camp because you don't support them or you do support them, but I'd rather just be an honest broker about things than people say, well, did he lie to me? Did he not?
I have a question for you guys, and then I want to go through a handful of bills just to kind of get your opinions on them. I should know this number off the top of my head, but you guys do have a supermajority. Is that correct? The Republicans?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Yeah. So does that mean that you don't even have to deal with the Democrats? You just end up just like, or no, they become, I mean, is it if you can't stop anything, what's their role other than having a resistance to something or just a counter arguments to things?
So, Andy, on the outside looking in, you would think that would mean they would have no influence. And in my opinion, that is far from the case. And you say, well, why is that? Well, the reason is the way the committee selection process works. So, for example, there was a bill that I presented this session in the Judiciary Committee. Well, there are 5 Democrats on that committee. And as the process goes forward and people are in different places running bills, that particular day, I knew that I didn't have the votes to get this piece of legislation through because there were several members of that committee that were not in the seat. So they absolutely can have some influence when it comes to your bills in the committees. The way that process works. That's how I see it, Aaron.
Well,
anyway,
and I'm assuming most of it's a lot of what you guys are doing is kind of bipartisan anyway, right? I mean, or is it like always partisan?
Well,
No,
I'd say
I'd say,
I'm sorry. It doesn't necessarily, Andy. It's not necessarily if it's a quote hard Republican or hard Democrat issue. There's so much legislation that we take on that we look at, and it's not necessarily what you would see as a national Republican or Democrat issue. So there's different views from both sides of the aisle on.
I mean, extending the fireworks sales for 5 days has nothing to do with any platform of a political party, right? I mean, let's just be honest. It's like, we're just going to sell fireworks for 5 more days, right? And so, and I can't imagine on the expansion to include more services within Medicaid, that's an issue that is also probably nonpartisan,
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
My guess is on something like that, it really comes down to people that just either are really physically conservative that say, we just don't want to spend any more money. It sounds like a great plan, but, look, we're tapped out. So Aaron, I'm curious. I know you didn't mention it as a low, but it looks like on the bill related to medical marijuana, allowing a drive-through service for folks that are disabled, et cetera. Is it surprising? I mean, I know you said it was surprising, but is there a reason they just didn't give you word early on, like, hey, we're not going to support that?
I don't know. One thing I think about is maybe into session, things were moving really fast. Of course, this one actually was kind of before all that craziness of session was moving. So I don't know if it's just one that just constantly was not one that they looked into or, had any concerns. Because usually, they're pretty good about saying, like, you even file a bill and they'll call you and say, hey, we were reviewing this and our department has concerns about XYZ. So kind of shocked that I would say that's kind of part of like the shock reason why. And, there's been other times I've had bills before signing where I'll get a call and they'll say, hey, we've got some questions about this. Can you answer it? And and you'd answer the question like, okay, yeah, we're good with it. Okay, cool. And then, next day the bill signed into law. So it was a little bit just because the call was like, hey, we're vetoing it. And it's like, can I talk to you about it? Nope. You're like, all right. So,
did you have enough votes? I assume it's super difficult once the governor says no to go back and rerun it. You'd have to have a lot of momentum and time, right?
Yeah. And then even on the override, I've had a few people ask me about that. And I even had someone this morning call me and go, man, I think you should run and override it. And I was like, here's the reality. I was like, Asa had, I think it was my first term or second term, his first term. He had vetoed a bill that got like 94 yay votes. And I actually remember I was one of the no votes on it, and of 4 no votes there were. And he vetoes it and it goes back. And I was like, yeah, I'm sure we're going to override this because 94 people voted for it. Thought it was good legislation, and then totally failed on the override.
Yeah, I got to imagine.
And so I was like, look, I stayed consistent. I was no the whole time. And so to me, I'm like, to see something like that, there was a little different during COVID. I think we overrode some vetoes he had back then, but different times, different scenario. But this is way more like back then in that 2017 session, So I just kind of think they're just not a momentum to do it. And you've got a lot of members who just, they don't want to touch weed and they don't want to do it. And her reasoning of saying like it's going to expand usage, I was like, I don't see that because we're not expanding cards. We're not expanding how much you can have. So I don't really understand that. But, it's their opinion, and, that's part of the process. So,
yeah, of course. I mean, and like, I know that for me, I look at it and to me, it sounds really simple, right? I have a view that's a little bit more libertarian where, I'd rather have less rules than more rules. And so I look at it and say like, gee whiz, if you're handicapped and you got to park your car and go what's the difference if you drive through?
And Andy, I think it'd be good for the listeners if we could kind of tell this story on.
Yeah, tell them what it is, Matt.
On this bill. Yeah. And Misty can give us the bill number and all that. But Aaron, if I recall, you originated the bill in the House. That's right. That was correct, right?
Yeah, I went through rules, yeah.
And so I'm on rules, and I remember I voted for it. But I don't recall it being a huge discussion on that bill and rules? Can you kind of tell the story about how the caucus went on the committee in it? Because I don't recall it being a very contentious bill.
No, it wasn't. It was one of those bills, you file, and if it goes to rules, you just know your phone's going to start ringing. And so, but it honestly didn't in that one. There was a lot of support from the industry behind it, but even like the opposition to, especially like marijuana that you see out of other groups, it just never came. And even when I ran the bill on the floor, like no one spoke against it. I think got 51 votes, and then I can't remember how many no votes, but there was also a ton of people who just didn't vote. They're just like, there's nothing wrong with the bill. I just don't want to vote for a marijuana bill.
It was 51 to 31.
Here's the stats here. HB 1889 in the House, it was on April the 2nd. It passed with a vote of 51 to 31. And then in the Senate, it passed with a vote of 19 to 15. So if my math is correct, in both chambers, it passed by one vote. So it was a narrow vote in the chambers.
Yeah.
But I recall being on rules, and to your point, Aaron, you ran that bill fairly early in session, as I recall. I mean, it was a month and a half so in, I think.
Yeah, it was pretty early when we first got it. So, but I mean, it's one of those deals where, like I said too, I don't think anyone spoke against it. I don't know in the Senate, but it was kind of one of those like, people kind of are iffy about marijuana bills, but nobody was like banging their chest, let's beat this bill back. It's terrible, So
sure.
Especially too because a lot of it was kind of just based off of some things that had happened during COVID, and so we were like, hey, we didn't have any problems during COVID. Why are we not doing this to the drive-through part? And so, and I even said too, I can't remember which reporter, but I was like, I wish they would have told me if there was a specific issue, because the bill did three things, and if there was one particular part they didn't like, but we could have kept the other two, I would have gladly made an amendment or something like that, just to do something to help these patients. I mean, even if they said, well, let's do drive through, but it's only for people with handicap placards. Okay, I mean that we could have done that, So, but is what it is right now. So
I have this sort of perception that just a lot of people, it's just they got other priorities. They don't necessarily want to get linked to it. They probably don't care, but but I don't know that either.
Yeah.
And so, all right, let me ask about the blue envelope, because this one this is one, Aaron, I have to say I really liked. But tell me what the so what of it is. Like how did this come about?
Yeah, so I had a constituent reach out to me actually and say, hey, this is a program I've read about in other states. I really think Arkansas should do it. And so I started looking into it, and I was like, yeah, man, this is a simple solution to, in many ways, kind of complex situations. And so for those who are listening who don't know, the blue envelope essentially is if you're an autistic driver, you're able to go to the revenue office or the DMV, get an envelope to keep your information in, but on the envelope, it's printed instructions for law enforcement. So this is a nonverbal way to communicate with law enforcement that, hey, I'm an autistic driver. I will not respond in normal ways to the situation. So it doesn't elevate the situation, because what you'll have, and police came out and supported this as well, because they were like, we'll stop someone. They're showing antisocial behavior. We take that as, this is maybe the situation's going to escalate. They're like, no, this is just someone who's autistic and is antisocial to begin with. And so there were some people who came and testified who had some, really terrible stories of some encounters they had that were just honestly tragic. And, I mean, the nice thing about these, these autistic individuals who came and testified is at no point were they ever upset with the police or anything like that. I mean, they understood it was a situation where they were not responding the way that they should have because of their condition. So this is, like I said, easy, simple solution. It's a nonverbal way to do it. I've actually seen some early drafts of what it's going to look like. So it's got printed instructions for the police officer that they can read and know how to handle the situation better.
Anybody vote against this? I would think this would be like.
I don't think a single person voted against it. So
yeah, because everybody's seen a feed on their social media about like either way, right? Like where a police encounter. And I get it. If I was a police officer, and I'd be a little scared sometimes, right? And I could see where I'd like, but you know what? I'm going to defend myself first, and then we'll figure this out second. Yeah. I can understand that. So I think that's something that really would help people out. And I heard you did a really good job with. I didn't see it myself, but for people that saw it, I heard a lot of good feedback about how the process worked when people were presenting and that. So it sounded like it was a big success. So congratulations on that.
I'm really happy about it. You know, we're the first state in the South to do it, and so I hope we can kind of be the model for other states in the South to kind of take this on, because there are only a few states that do it. It's actually California's got a few counties that do it, and there's like one or two Northeast states, but I hope it kind of catches on.
That's pretty creative. You know, all right, I'm gonna switch gears on the medical.
Andy,
yeah,
hang
go
on
ahead,
one
Matt.
quick on this bill. Aaron, thanks so much. Of all the legislation that you passed, I think the blue envelope, from my perspective, I guess because I have a little more inside baseball on it than a lot of your medical field policy that you do. But Andy, this is such an important thing that literally can help save these people's lives. And quick story. At the condominium I stay at in Little Rock, it was a morning, and it was one of those days where you're rushing around, and I stayed on the third floor. Typically at that time of day, nobody's around, nobody's getting on off the elevators. So I'm standing there and I'm waiting to get on the elevator with the elevator doors open, and this guy who is blaring salsa music on his phone. He tries to step out as I'm stepping in, and as he does, we collide, and he steps on my foot, bruising up my toe and everything. And I was like, dude, what the insert a few adjectives I should have said. And the guy, he said he was sorry, but he didn't. It was just one of those awkward early morning encounters you don't really see. Well, anyway, I got a little fired up about it. I mean, I wasn't going to,
physical, maybe.
Get physical with the guy on the elevator. Anyway, but long story short, the day kind of progressed. And I thought about it. I said, man, what was up with that guy? I didn't know. And then I saw him around the complex later on, and I figured out and found out that he was autistic. And so, that was just these situations happen with people who have autism, and just day to day. And what some people interpret as them being rude or perhaps aggressive, which can lead to conflict. It's not them being that at all. I mean, this is how that person is as a result of that. So what Representative Pilkington really did is, when these officers pull people over with autism, and the officer may ask them a question, and they may look at them, stone faced, or they may kind of officers can see that as aggression. With this blue envelope program, Andy, they hand that envelope, man, it really, really has the potential to save lives. I think it's an awesome piece of legislation.
I totally get it. The handful of times I've been pulled over, the officers have been super nice, and so, but I had it twice where I would say they were speed traps, but where the officer was really aggressive. But it de-escalated really, really quick, because I'm super respectful and I'm not running my mouth but I'm just like, yeah, I'm sorry, and so, but, and I was clearly speeding, I mean, I wasn't grossly speeding, but, I was going, typically there's a spot in Menifee where you go from 55 to 35, in this back road to Conway. And, but I can imagine if you were autistic and didn't know how to respond, that could, escalate instead of de-escalate, and so, so congratulations on that. On one that didn't work, I also sort of want to know give me the backstory here, the so what of it, on the Medicare postpartum. As I understand it, 41% of births in Arkansas are all covered in Medicaid. And I don't know, does that statistic sound right to you?
Actually, maybe a little higher, but yeah, that's about right. I mean, we're essentially, most births are Medicaid births, so.
Which is pretty that's an astounding statistic in my book. That I mean, it tells you a lot about what the situation that a lot of people are in, whether it's 41 or 45 or even 50. When you go so the current law is 60 days of access to medical treatment for postpartum issues, and you wanted to expand it to a year, correct?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
And was most people's resistance just a cost issue?
Yeah, so most people would say, well, we don't want to spend the money, the cost. But granted, it was $2 million was the cost, and then I can't tell you how many bills we passed that were more than that. And I was like, oh, apparently we didn't have a problem on that one. But so I'm Alyssa Brown, who's a freshman, Gen Z, is my seatmate, and so I would make a lot of these comments to her.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
probably tired of hearing them. But of course, then the bill I had.
You're not saying people would be hypocritical with dollars, are you?
Yeah.
I'm just teasing.
But yeah, and then actually, one of the things we did at the end was we amended it to where they were using. We were going to go to the HHS at the federal level and ask for a specific waiver to allow us to use CHIP administrative money to pay for that $2 million. So I think there's about like $12 million in that account. So we were able to use that money to pay the state share. So it actually cost $0 state dollars. So that at the end was kind of one of those deals where we were like, we are eliminating the last hurdle. Because at first it was duplication of services. So then we said, well, hey, we're doing auto enrollment into our home. So if they need to be in that, that's a better program. It's a 90-10 match for the state, better than traditional Medicaid. And if they don't qualify for that, then we go to this other one, which is the expansion model. And then we're going to use CHIP money to pay for that. So there's literally no new state dollars on it. So that was, that's kind of how we did it. And then, of course, near the end, they tried to muddy the water with this idea that it was going to somehow we were going to end up paying for illegal aliens to be on Medicaid and get this. And because there is a current program from 2004 that allowed illegal aliens to access Medicaid for births for that 60-day period. That's a law that's been in place since 2004. And so they were kind of muddying the waters. And I literally was like outside the room before the debate talking to some senators and being like, they get to write the waiver. They can literally put in the waiver that only this expansion could go towards U.S. citizens. I was like, so this is a red herring. This is a false flag, whatever you want to call it, that doesn't actually matter.
Yeah.
And I was like, they're just using it to muddy the water. But apparently it was effective enough that the senators said no.
Because it didn't get out of the committee, right?
What was that?
Didn't get out of the committee in the Senate.
Yes, it did not get out of the committee. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So, and it's, that's a shame. And, I feel bad that happened. But I did get appointed the chair of the subcommittee that oversees DHS, so we're going to have a really fun interim with some of these claims. So,
got it, Matt. What would you hear?
Like
I don't know if you paid attention to this bill, but are there things that you would hear that would be like, okay, this is other reasons why people would do it, would be opposed it, other than the cost?
Sure. Well, I'm not on that. Did that go through public health?
Yeah, with their public health and then the floor and.
Okay. Yeah, anything, not just Rep Pilkington's bills, but anything that came up, Andy, that had anything to do with Medicaid, anything negative you'd hear or any criticisms or questions, it was always to do with the money. I mean, it was that. It was typically never the intent. It was to do with with that.
Well, we don't have unlimited funds, so we have to pick and choose for sure, right? And so.
Yeah.
Let's switch gears to data centers for a second. One of the things I find really interesting about data centers is, I believe I've got this right. I don't know if this is the last session, but I believe it was the last session where you basically said, the legislature said that they didn't want Chinese companies owning data centers, which I think resulted in 10 of them that were on the market here in Arkansas, because I looked at some of them to acquire them. But I may have my legislation facts incorrect. Is that about what you would understand from the last time?
Maybe. So I can kind of walk it back a little bit. So
okay.
Let me put it this way. This is actually kind of a great story how citizen legislatures kind of work. I have another job outside of here, and a buddy of mine who works there says, hey, I've got a fishing buddy from Northern Virginia. We were fishing Lake Darnell, and he said, man, I can't believe there's no data centers here in Arkansas. And he goes, all we need is cheap power, cheap land. And you can get $1 billion investment into these areas because everyone's looking to get out of Northern Virginia because it's overbuilt. And there's too much,
Aaron, I lost you. Misty, can you hear him?
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Okay, sorry.
Just rewind it a little
good.
bit. We can cut all this out.
Sure. I don't know where I cut off.
Just start at Lake Dardanelle.
Okay, so so Lake Darnell, there's two buddies are fishing, one of which is a developer for data centers, and he just said, man, it'd be amazing to put one over here. The land's cheap, the power's pretty cheap. You've got access to water and to I-40, and he's like, I just can't believe there's none here. And talk about everyone trying to move out of Northern Virginia and especially from California because it is so expensive in those places, right? And so he asked his buddy and he was like, "Hey, do you know anyone in state government?" And I was the only guy he knew,
like,
so he called me
I
up.
know somebody.
Yeah. And so I went and talked to him and go, "Yeah, let's do this." And I got him connected with an economic developer I know. And so we started talking about it. But then the thing was, and this is the last session, not the current session, they were like, "Man," and they like literally were like, first like day of due diligence, they were like, "Whoa, Arkansas is considered like a black spot on the data center map. Like, don't build data centers here." And actually Walmart, when they built their $1 billion data center, they built it 1 mile over the line in Missouri because of the way.
Okay.
Yes. So they've got a $1 billion data center in Missouri that they built over there because we don't have the sales tax exemption on electricity that most states do with these data centers. And so that was kind of the big push that year was, okay, we need to at least get ourselves off the black site map and get ourselves on there. Because we are, like I said, our land's relatively cheap, our power's reasonable. We've got a pretty decent workforce too. And so this is a good place to build and some power going through here. So we did that. We convinced a lot of people. Some people were a little hesitant about it. Because like, well, how much tax money are we getting? It's like, there's not a single data center in the state right now. We're a mega data center. That's it. These are large data centers. You've got the smaller ones. Like
You got the smaller ones.
No issue there. And then, of course, what's funny is we wrote it to make sure that crypto wasn't involved in it because of the way it has to be a certain amount of investment, certain amount of salaries have to be to Arkansas. I think it's like $1 million or $2 million salaries, which, crypto mines can't produce, and has to be, I think, over a $500 million investment, which is pretty huge.
Big.
Yeah, big. And so to get this, so that's why we did it. Of course, the funny thing too was then when all this crypto stuff started going and go crazy, crypto people would call themselves data centers. And so literally the last 2 years, I had to fight and educate a lot of my members about, hey guys, these things are two different things. What Amazon and what Google and Meta are building over here, these are $5 billion investments. These are way different than someone who's trying to build a crypto mine over here and just mine crypto dollars. But there was, for a lot of our members, they were unfamiliar with the concepts, and they go, well, they're calling themselves a data center. And I was like, but those are not. And so that was kind of a big deal the last 2 years. So we did that. We ran another round of bills because we did this, all of a sudden all these data centers started coming to Arkansas, looking at land. And of course, what's very aggravating too is we only have a session every 2 years. So in this interim time between the last session and this session, every state around us copied our bill, copied the Arkansas law. And so Mississippi got that massive Amazon data center because they were like, yeah, we're going to do the Arkansas model and make it a little bit sweeter.
Just a little
and
better.
then bam, they get it. And same with Alabama getting the Meta data center too. It's actually funny, the lobbyist for Meta called me and he found out that Arkansas had lost out on that deal because his dad called. It's like, hey, you'll never hear the news. The town next over is getting a Meta data center. And it was, but once again, so we had to re-up kind of how we did the structure to make it a little more enticing to some of these people. And so hopefully we'll finally get it. And then of course there was the power bill too that happened, which was really big, important to kind of track these two, because something else in the development with the people we've been working with in Clarksville for a while is getting the power, because we are not generating enough power right now in the United States. And so, these things take up massive amounts of power. So you've got to make sure you get power. And, obviously we work in a massive grid. And, for Johnson County, what's actually really troubling, and luckily in Pope, y'all don't have this issue, we're bisected by, national grids. So A&O, if I build a data center in Clarksville, I can't get my power from A&O, even though I have massive amounts of A&O. But yet if I build a data center in Memphis, they can get the power from A&O.
Really? That part I didn't know.
Go
ahead. Sorry.
I'm saying you can, but then you've got to pay a fee for going from one grid to the other. And so basically it really, basically de-incentivizes you. So it's like you can get, I'm basically using power out of Texas to then help do my data center in Clarksville. And it's very interesting. But obviously generation is a huge issue coming on, because I think in 2027, we're going to run out of generation in this country. And so there's a secret, I don't know, maybe it's not that secret, but I think a lot of people don't really know this. There is a mad rush to how can we produce more energy generation, because we're desperately behind where we need to be. So
And just to give an example to lean into this about what I think sort of drives this. And so I'm using AI tools all the time. And I was with somebody 2 days ago. We're at lunch, and what they had done is taken all of their blood work for their, last 25 years, put it into a folder, or I guess you might call it a prompt in ChatGPT, and basically took a picture of the menu and asked ChatGPT what to eat, in that menu. And so I just think we're going to do way more of this instead of way less of this. And you're right. When I looked at these data centers, just to sort of anybody listening, here's what it looks like. I mean, essentially, I locate next to a power source, let's say the nuclear plant, and I have an agreement with them to buy power over a period of time. And essentially, it looks a little bit like, or it would function a little bit like if you were building a storage center. So I have a building and I build all these racks, but I don't put the computers in. That's what the people that are leasing them from. And so the ones I was looking at were Arkansas, but they were smaller, and what they were doing is completely on cryptocurrency. So your customer would have been, in this case, this is why we didn't do it. There was Chinese crypto mining companies that would rent out the space, and they're not interchangeable, just like you said. You if you wanted an AI center, it's a little bit different. It might seem the same, but it's a little bit different. But this stuff we're going to have more of, not less of, and so it's going to be definitely a thing. I think that to drive the state, we got to get right, or we're going to get beat out by other people. There's tons of examples about where a state made good. Well, I'll give you one, like on a side note. Atlanta used to be the headquarters of all the major bankings in the South. North Carolina made a few little bill changes, and that's why a lot of them just picked them up and right to Charlotte. Okay, guys, one last question here. So if we had to give an MVP-ish sort of award that you can't give to yourself or to each other, but somebody else who you thought did an excellent job, went the extra distance, et cetera, who would you say that was in this year's legislature?
I actually would probably, it's funny, I was joking with a group of other legislators about this. I probably would say it was Candid Underwood out of Northwest Arkansas. He ran the grocery tax, ran a couple other just really good bills, and it was like he didn't miss. I mean, there wasn't a time when I saw a single one of his bills go down in flames. He took on hard issues, but was just really good. And he just said, he just had a great session. And so I was kind of shocked. And it was actually funny. We just we're laughing about that today, who we thought had a good session. I think Candid Underwood just had a fantastic session.
Matt?
My pick would be Representative Matt Brown from Conway. Matt's an attorney, and Matt is so quick to help anybody with anything in regards to the drafting of bills, looking at it from a legal perspective. He was there and helped me on so many of my bills, and I know he did that with many, many others. So Matt he may not get a lot of credit for it on the front end because his name may not be there. But Andy, he played an instrumental role in some really good policy that otherwise I don't know if would have made it over the finish line. So my pick would be Representative Matt Brown would be mine.
Excellent. There you go.
Matt is amazing.
Okay, I have to ask because I just find it really interesting. Tell me about Gulf of America. Why? I mean, is it just like you love Trump and you want to lean into that, or is it what? Tell me why. And I know it's a resolution.
Yeah, it was gosh, it's so funny. I mean, I did not think that would blow up the way it did. It was kind of a little bit tongue in cheek. I mean, one thing I would say is hey, if our feds are going to do it, we should follow suit. Which is actually funny. We passed a bill requiring us to rename how we refer to the West Bank, and nobody seemed to care about that at all. But
I didn't know that. Okay.
Oh yeah. And I was looking around wait, this is an actual bill that requires something. Nobody says a word. I do a non-binding resolution if people lose their minds. But no, it just was one of those. I just thought, good way to just say, hey, we're with it. Let's just show some support for President Trump and what he wants to do. It's a resolution. It's non-binding. But some people, really lost their minds over it. And so it is kind of funny, right? I tell people all the time, it's amazing. We'll get thousands of emails about this that literally is a do nothing non-binding resolution. And yet a bill that will spend $20 million, we don't hear a single thing from anybody on.
What's
Nothing.
amazing what stirs the pot for people because, I don't know, Matt, what did you think?
What? Ask me that again, Andy.
So, like Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of America, you got an opinion or not really?
I mean, it's like Aaron said. I mean, it was a resolution, but it's interesting to see what people get fired up, and some people get fighting mad over a resolution. And to his point, you'll have a bill that's going to use $20 million of our $20 million of our tax dollars, and people don't.
It's interesting how like it's something that's so important gets so little, but you can take something that really has not a lot of meaning, right? Like almost no meaning, right? It's a resolution.
Yeah.
And it's funny for me because, we rename stuff all the time. So on one hand, like, I don't care, but there is this thing about like, do we want to create unnecessary confusion or like, are there some names that are sacrosanct? But, anyway.
Let me unpack it.
I would say the one thing that actually was really funny when I was doing the research on this was the fact that there is, I think it's the Gulf of California, but they call it the Sea of Cortez. And I'm like, whoa. I mean, if we're going to rename stuff, we're having different names on here. Let's keep it consistent. But it was, and then of course, actually the long list of different bodies of water that have different names. It was actually, I would say, very enlightening for me to just learn that when I did this. But once again, it's like Google Maps, Apple Maps, they all say it now. To me, it seemed like no big deal. But, I had one person go, every school's going to have to throw out their textbooks. And I was like, are you serious? You really believe that? I'm like, well, they might do it. I'm like, if you have a superintendent who's going to throw out all their books over a non-binding resolution, I think that school board needs to look for a new superintendent.
Matt, what do you think, man? We're going to leave the final rule with you, Matt.
Okay, it was at the first of session too, Aaron. So there wasn't, it had a lot more focus on it than otherwise it might have, too. I remember you ran it towards the first of the session. So I think that played a factor, as well. Also, Aaron, it's Friday, so I'm sure your campaign phone is lit up like mine. Andy, Aaron and I joke that every Friday we won't hear from a constituent one until Friday. And Friday, our phones will blow up, especially like we were talking about, especially after 6 p.m. We just joked about that.
Yeah, they want to talk to you after hours. It's never during the day.
Here's the thing, and I don't mind it, but I told Matt, like, it's so sad because they call you and it's like, I can't do anything for you till Monday because no one's there. Like, and there have been some cases where it's like someone's called me and we have been able to fix things over the weekend when someone's Medicaid gets cut off and their daughter needs their insulin. So we've been able to do that a few times, but I'm like, I kind of tell people like, please call me. Normal business hours is perfectly fine. I will pick up the phone. So,
well, I want to tell you thank you and also happy Easter.
Thank you. Yeah, happy Easter.
Yep. And so we really appreciate you coming on to Free Arkansas. And again, you can go look on the different statistics on freearkansas.com. Matt, you want to close us out?
Yeah, let me say this. Not only is Aaron Pilkington a state representative and a hard-working guy, he's also a dad. And Aaron has 3 kids, right?
Yep, 3 sons.
Kids.
Yep.
His lovely wife, Emma, who's just a sweetheart. Behind every good legislator like Aaron, there's a good wife at home. So definitely want to commend her for giving that support system.
Thanks, Matt.
As well. So, but anyway, thanks so much, Aaron, for coming on, and hope you have a good weekend. And thank you so much for joining us on Free Arkansas this week.
Yeah, happy to do it. Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it. It's great conversation.